crime fines that are not collected. For many years, I've addressed and pressed the Justice Department to ensure that the Crime Victims Fund has sufficient resources. That fund supports victims and survivors of crime towns and all across America. Congress established the fund to be taxpayer neutral. Its balances are filled through criminal fines and penalties that the Justice Department collects and deposits in that Crime Victims Fund. Last Congress, my oversight revealed that the Biden Justice Department failed to collect and deposit more than $1 billion in fines and penalties. The Biden-Harris administration was weak on crime and weak on protecting victims. Since my oversight, the balance of the fund has increased from $1 billion in 2023, the lowest in over a decade, to its current balance of $3.5 billion. Last April, this senator, along with Senators Ernst, Crapo, and Risch, sent a letter to the Justice Department. In that letter, we urge the Justice Department to avoid the failures of the Biden administration. In June 2025, the Justice Department updated its policies, prioritizing vindicating the rights of victims. It's a step in the right direction. Now, according to the Department of Justice statistics, at the end of fiscal year 2024, the department identified almost $10 billion in outstanding criminal fines and penalties that remain uncollected. That money could help many victims and survivors of crime. February 11th of this year, I, along with Senators Collins, Ernst, Crapo, and Risch, wrote to the Justice Department about their efforts to collect that money. Our letter highlighted two main points. First, collecting the money would hold criminals accountable. Second, collecting the money would provide substantial boost to the Crime Victims Fund. We senators urged the Justice Department in our letter to prioritize collecting these funds and to keep our offices updated on how those efforts to collect that money goes. I look forward to hearing from the current Department of Justice about the status of these efforts so we can make sure that victims of crime are benefited from the bad aspects of criminal activity. I yield the floor. Suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Also-Brooks.
Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to waive the mandatory quorum call in relation to the motion to proceed to calendar number 343. I ask unanimous consent the quorum call be suspended.
Without objection.
And now I ask unanimous consent to waive the mandatory quorum call in relation to the motion to proceed to calendar number 343, H.R. 6644.
Without objection.
Mr. President, over the weekend, American forces took action against the longtime threat posed by the mullahs in Tehran. For decades, Iran has fomented terror throughout the Middle East, endangering U.S. service members, U.S. citizens, and personnel in the region, and many of our allies. In addition, Iran has relentlessly pursued the development of its own nuclear program, despite repeated violations identified by the international atomic watchdog, the IAEA. Iran is also aggressively growing the range and inventory of its ballistic missiles and launchers, an inventory that is already the largest in the region. Combine that with a Navy that aims to threaten a key shipping channel, and it is clear that Iran poses a serious risk to America's national security interests, as well as those of our allies and partners. Mr. President, President Trump and his administration relentlessly pursued a diplomatic solution to the threat posed by Iran, but the Iranian regime refused diplomatic off-ramps. And so now the President is taking action. My prayers are for the success of the mission and, above all, for the safety of U.S. personnel in harm's way. 4 U.S. service members have lost their lives as a result of Iranian attacks. My thoughts and prayers today are with their families and loved ones and with their fellow service members. Mr. President, ask a group of people what they think of when they think of the American dream, and home ownership is pretty likely to come up. A house, a neighborhood, a yard for the kids or pet to play, getting the keys to a place of your own. That's a part of the American dream for a lot of Americans. But it's a part of the American dream that has been increasingly out of reach for many. A lot of Americans, particularly younger Americans, are simply being priced out of the housing market. Home prices have risen sharply in the past few years, surging roughly 50% since the pandemic, according to the New York Times. A 2025 report from the Joint Center for Housing Studies at Harvard reported, and I quote, the U.S. median existing single-family home price hit a new high of $412,500 in 2024, according to the National Association of Realtors. This is a shocking 5 times the median household income and significantly above the price-to-income ratio of 3 that has traditionally been considered affordable, end quote. Well, with numbers like these, Mr. President, it's no wonder that the age of first-time home buyers has risen sharply as well to an all-time high of age 40. Mr. President, the American people have been through a lot over the last few years, notably the historic inflation crisis that defined the Biden administration. And since we took office last January, Republicans' priority here in Congress has been easing the burden on hardworking Americans. That started with preventing a massive $2.6 trillion tax hike that was scheduled to hit Americans making less than $400,000 a year. And it continued with a slew of new tax relief for hardworking Americans and the working families tax cuts, which Republicans passed last summer. There's nothing like having more money in your pocket to make it a little easier to deal with financial challenges and unexpected bills. In January of this year, we took aim at health care costs with a bill that included multiple measures to lower the price of prescription drugs at the pharmacy counter. And this week, Mr. President, we are tackling the challenges of home ownership and beginning work on the most significant housing bill in a decade or more. The Road to Housing Act, the product of extensive work from the Senate Banking Committee, and particularly from its chairman, Tim Scott, packages together a number of bills focused on lowering housing costs and increasing housing supply. And it takes aim at these goals in multiple ways. One primary focus of the bill is removing unnecessary regulatory barriers that drive up the cost of housing or complicate construction. The bill's Housing Supply Expansion Act, for example, which is the product of Senators Britt, Tillis, Crapo, and others, removes the outdated chassis requirement for manufactured housing. This will not only lower the cost of manufactured homes, but it will also allow for more innovation in the manufactured home design process, such as two-story houses. Manufactured homes are already substantially less expensive than site-built dwellings, and removing the outdated chassis rule will further increase their affordability and create more manufactured options that suit more families. And that, Mr. President, is just the tip of the iceberg. Senator Rounds has multiple bills in the Road to Housing Act that will increase housing supply by streamlining the environmental review process. The Choice and Affordable Housing Act, the work of Senators Kramer, Sullivan, Moran, and Curtis, as well as others, will streamline inspection requirements for affordable homes financed by multiple government programs. And I could go on. There are a lot more measures in the Road to Housing Act to eliminate or streamline regulations. And with regulations accounting for around 25% of the cost of constructing a single-family dwelling, and for roughly 40% of the costs of multifamily housing projects, anything we can do to streamline and simplify can go a long way toward making housing more affordable. But the Road to Housing Act does a lot more than simply targeting unnecessary regulations. The Act is also designed to unleash private sector investment in more affordable homes. Road Act legislation from Senators Scott, Marino, McCormick, Cassidy, and Crapo, for example, will increase a statutory cap that limits banks' ability to invest in more affordable housing and other community development projects. The Build Now Act from Senator Kennedy creates a pilot program to incentivize a wide variety of housing development in communities that participate in the Federal Community Development Block Grant Program. Mr. President, there's a lot more in the Road to Housing Act that I can discuss in one speech. There's much more I could say on the ways this bill will streamline regulation and unleash investment. And I haven't even mentioned the bill's provisions to help veterans, or increase the supply of housing in rural communities, or help Americans living in government-assisted housing build the savings that they need for home ownership. There's a lot in this bill, Mr. President. And I want to extend my thanks to Banking Committee Chairman Scott and Ranking Member Elizabeth Warren for putting in the work to assemble so many good pieces of legislation and to get the final product to the floor. The Road to Housing Act doesn't spend a single taxpayer dollar, Mr. President. But by removing barriers to affordable housing construction and unleashing investment, this bill stands to open the door to affordable homes for hardworking Americans around the country. And I look forward to passing this legislation in the very near future. Mr. President, I yield the floor, and I suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Also Brooks.